Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. So, this is our Solomon and More podcast. We had to take a break from this, but we're going to continue to get back on where we're making content, try to do it weekly for everyone. How are you today, Solomon?
I'm living the dream, dude. Yeah, excited to be getting back on the horse here with with these conversations that we have. I missed them a lot. I mean, April kind of sucked with taxes and everything else, but definitely time to get back into the swing of things here. So excited to be here, man.
So, our first PDF is iShares by BlackRock. So, iShares creates ETFs in the stock market. They have like leveraged ETFs, and I think SQs is like short the Nasdaq, and that's by iShares. And this is BlackRock, right? So, in this PDF, they talk about crypto, central bank digital currencies, and they talk about, well, let me just read this. Currently, 87 countries representing 90% of the world's GDP are exploring CBDCs, which could drastically reduce marketplace frictions, democratize access to financial markets, and optimize monetary policies. Yet the market still appears to underappreciate how these benefits in state-sponsored and independent cryptocurrencies may drive faster proliferation. While most of the market attention has focused on the price and volatility of cryptocurrencies themselves, we believe the broader opportunity leveraging blockchain technology for payments, contracts, and consumption broadly has not yet been priced in. So, what are some of your thoughts about this?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is dealing much more so in big picture as far as network effect is concerned. We know that a lot of these central banks, probably the majority of them are using, well, or they're all using tech integrators, right? What's interesting to me is that some of the platforms that might be utilized, it's not pricing in platform value. So, you can look at, an asset like XRP, but then really look at the XRP ledger and what the value would be if the XRP ledger was utilized for some of these large tier CBDCs. And it's really interesting that we talk about there's probably only a small number of these assets and platforms that are being utilized to integrate the tech necessary for these banking institutions to be able to survive and build out these CBDC initiatives. And there's digital assets that are certainly swimming in the same stream as a lot of these platforms.
Yeah, the networks that crypto assets create, right? These public networks, there's always some type of division that regulators and everyone tried to make that division between crypto and CBDCs. But in my mind, a lot of these central bank digital currency projects are going to intertwine with the public chains, their networks, especially the networks that we've seen with incumbents using them, setting up proof of concepts. Like, what's the purpose of a public chain? It's so everyone has access to it. So anything between CBDC is anything that would require a trustless network is going to have a future, especially with everything digitized and tokenized. These networks can have interoperability with these different assets. And then on top of this is BlackRock that's saying this, right? So I mean, BlackRock's the largest banking institution in the entire world, and they have tremendous pull with central banks, with governments. I believe that they set up, like, the monetary policy that we have today was originally like a white paper by BlackRock, and everyone's following that white paper to a T. Like, what happens when X, Y, and Z happen? X, Y, and Z happened, and they're following BlackRock's white paper. So, tremendous influence in the financial markets and just macro economy.
Yeah, and even we can stay on that for 1 second, Darren, because even from the fund management standpoint, if you've done the work, it's arguable, but that BlackRock potentially runs the world, right? And all of the money that flows through the world. But I like paying attention to the narrative that's being presented to us, and even BlackRock is doing it right here. And we have another portion of this where, from the European Central Bank, basically talking about the imminent issuance of CBDCs. So there's been a rhetoric shift over the past handful of years where 4 or 5 years ago, from these large scale banking institutions, you hear about the risks of digital assets, and even the risks from a CBDC standpoint. And then even a handful of months ago, you see the ECB, basically saying by 2024, we're going to have a proof of concept. And then about a week ago, there was that tweet that the ECB put out that said imminent issuance of digital assets. It's like, it's not exploring CBDCs is one thing, but I think we are past that because the cat's out of the bag. I mean, they're exploring them, but they're building out for them because they know that there's kind of that impending time frame where CBDCs are going to be a real thing across the board. And 90% of the world's gross domestic product. I mean, that's insane. I mean, that's everything. That's all the money, right? Pretty much flowing through CBDCs and then integrating with, probably some of the platforms and assets that we're talking about on a daily basis here. So,
yeah, well, the other part of this is they talk about just having to optimize monetary policy. And if we look at where the 10-year is, right, like where are they? Where do they have to go? They have to go negative, and they can't just do that negative. They have to have some type of central bank digital currency that allows them to go negative. So if we go to the weekly, at least, like, right, so this is the 10-year. This isn't the right chart, but anyway, like, resistance is at 2%. So once we hit 2%, there's going to have to be a pivot with the Fed as long as we hit 2%, something breaks. So I think the whole purpose of central bank digital currencies, why they want them, is to go negative, and it looks like resistance was at 2%. So I found that interesting. The next piece of information is MUFG to cut remittance fees between Thailand and Indonesia by 80%. And MUFG is a RippleNet partner. They're also one of the largest banks in the entire world too. And we're seeing that they're cutting their remittance fees just by using that. They have to be using technology, right, to do this. They're not just able to cut it out of nowhere. So we know that they're a RippleNet partner. It doesn't specifically say if they're using XRP or anything like that, but you'd have to think that something's going on here where they're at least digitizing and using updated technology.
Yeah, that bank in Thailand looks familiar that was up above there. And I think you and I can both agree what you find whenever you start looking into some of these announcements as far as digitization is. Well, this certainly deals in digitization. There's no way to cut fees like that unless you're digitizing, the banking aspects. If you start digging into the weeds with some of these partner banks that they're doing this with, I would be willing to guarantee you that you'll find relationships as far as blockchain and DLT are concerned within that. So it is familiar. I'll have to look up that after the fact. But yeah, I mean, we know MUFG is tied deeply in one of the biggest banking institutions in the world. Certainly has ties to RippleNet, et cetera, et cetera. So and this is kind of just what we've consistently seen. I mean, over the past few years, I mean, all of these institutions are cutting fees, even eliminating staff, because everything's going digital. So it's kind of it's interesting. It's just more and more and more adoption. So
yeah, that's true too. They're actually taking away staff. I didn't get a chance to find this soundbite here, but this is the central bank of the Philippines, and he uses one of Brad Garlinghouse's quotes during this speech.
With some large financial institutions limited in the Philippines. So we have to learn to walk before we run. So that's the
yeah. So you kind of hear like the same type of rhetoric coming out of central bankers, regulators, Ripple. It's kind of funny listening to all line up like that.
Yeah, I mean, we see similar things with kind of the last mile narrative that I know that Ripple has talked about quite a bit. I've seen actually other institutions kind of mention Internet of Value. These are all things that, interestingly enough, that I mean, I initially had seen these types of narratives like coming out of Ripple, and then you start to see these narratives being presented by lots and lots of other institutions. So it's pretty interesting. Oh, by the way, dude, kudos on this. This was a sniper find from you. This came out from the clearinghouse, I believe, right? It was a Volante announcement, and you want to walk us through this a little bit because you underlined some interesting verbiage.
Yeah, so this was brought to my attention by XRP Beavis, and he tagged me on this, and then I started reading the documents. So this was the original original tweet, and I zoomed in on the picture, and it looks like they've got a stack of paper. So if you're not familiar with the clearinghouse is like FedNow, but for the private sector. So it's the United States domestic payments consortia of all the large banks in the United States makes this platform happen. And it's a legacy banking platform that's, that was antiquated and slow and everything. So they literally have updated this. And you could see in these documents, so we know Volante's partner with Ripple Integrator rather, that's set up to use RippleNet software. Then it says Akoya is the first third-party service provider for tokenized payments. Then it says the clearinghouse and new tokenization capability. So it's this infrastructure that has interoperability with the old world. And that's kind of what David Schwartz has said in previous speeches, that they had to rebuild like the whole system just so they can use digital assets. Like if you go back to like FedWire, you're not going to be able to send a digital asset through FedWire. You need to have an updated system that allows that to happen. And this is what the clearinghouse obviously is doing, since now they're saying they're going to have tokenized payments and tokenized capability.
Yeah, and I mean, we even know through Matthew Liny in the XRP community on Twitter had asked the question to Volante probably a year ago underneath one of their tweets. I think it was Volpay, one of the products in Volante's product suite. Because we do know Volante is RippleNet, if the ability to utilize XRP was an option within Volpay, and we do know that is 100% something that can be utilized. They responded, and then they put out subsequent tweets stating that that XRP can be utilized through Volante, and Volante is integrated into a myriad of different ecosystems. Looks like TCH, the clearinghouse, we know FedNow. I think they have ties to Swift. I mean, it's across the board. Volante is has tons of integration, so very interesting.
Yeah, I've also found documents that said the clearinghouse was using Finastra's Global Pay Plus, that we also know is integrated into RippleNet. And I've also came across bankers in that were anti-XRP that were saying that they're not exclusive to one technology. They have like their own technology. But if all the integrators are on that platform and have access to that service, and they all are RippleNet integrated, then you can draw a line where you want to. But
go ahead.
Also, Akoya is they're tokenizing credentials, right? So the whole KYC, your driver's license, going to be tokenized, and you're able to send that encrypted through the platform, so nobody else can spy in to see like what your credentials are. It's direct line between you and the bank, and that's what Akoya is doing with this.
Yep, 100%, man. I lost my point. I had a point. I don't remember what it was now.
I'm sorry about that. All right. Well, let me know if you remember it. So this one is ACI Worldwide. You may remember ACI as also an integrator. And it says real-time payments help to generate additional economic output. And it shows a forecast of 2026 from today. So 2021 rather, and you're adding almost 100 billion to this. So you're over doubling economic output. So GDP, you're going to add 10.35 million jobs. So we're heading towards a recession right now, and just by upgrading the technology, you're able to add this many jobs, increase GDP. I mean, to me, this technology is a no-brainer. At one point, everyone's going to cave into it, and we're seeing that.
Yeah, I think even with the point with Akoya in the previous slide, like as far as KYC and credentials, et cetera, you remember like 2 podcasts ago, we were looking through that Fed document, and they had kind of the peer-to-peer mechanism. It showed a person and a person, and then it had NFTs like in the middle. So there's a lot of different things. I've said this before. I think where this all ends up is we are essentially going to be those unique items that exist within a ledger. I mean, the whole goal is to tie us in and to have our credentials, visible, and it is what it is. I mean, but that is where it goes, however many years it takes, for that system to be rolled out completely through to fruition. But, it starts with things like KYC and this whole initiative for crypto and blockchain and kind of the mass adoption of it starts with these institutions that we're talking about right now from the payments sector. And they're trying to figure out what they can utilize without killing it from a regulatory standpoint, I think. And then it just starts tackling all these other sectors. And then eventually it starts tackling us. But we'll get there eventually. I mean, it's kind of a scary thought, but that's kind of that's my 2 cents on it.
Well, I mean, it is a scary thought, right? If somebody on top is kind of manipulating everything for some type of devious plan, right? But it does offer a tremendous amount of benefits too. So it really depends on like how it's rolled out, and if the people on the top corrupted, or if this is more pushed towards the ideas of the ideology of like what crypto stands for. I want to have self-sovereignty, I want privacy, those types of ideas. So it does have potential to be a really good thing. So
I agree.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, what were you going to say? Anything?
No. I was just, I mean, it's all about, kind of, some of the things that we've seen with Web 2 and what's happening to our data versus how we expect and want and need to have Web 3 built out. So it's all on how it's managed. It's all on how it's built. I mean, the opportunities to us all, kind of have that level playing field aspect is amazing. And to be able to custody our own data is amazing. But it's about how it's built, I think. That's, it could go one way or it could go the other. And I think we all need it to go the way where we're not getting into the weeds here with potentially being, more so controlled than we already are, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And like what we did see misuse from Facebook, right? But what ended up happening is it brought awareness to everyone, and now that's being fought. So, same thing can happen with what we're dealing with, and everything could work out. So I found this Congressional Research Service, and it's not telling us anything new except for it was talking about de-risking with correspondent banking and the implications of what that means over time. So de-risking, if you're not familiar with that, is like some of these jurisdictions that Ripple has ODL corridors in. What ends up happening is it becomes too much cost for the correspondent to actually do business in that jurisdiction, and they end up just cutting it completely because they're not making enough money. So they just cut it off. They get fined too much. They deal with too much of a hassle. So that whole country, can't participate in the global economy. And this is a Congressional Research Service just talking about that. So it's in their radar.
Yep.
So this is the Bank of England that you sent me.
Oh yeah, I mean, I found this interesting. Just kind of laying out the roadmap for the renewed real-time gross settlement service beyond 2024 for the Bank of England. And I guess as a primer or a background within this, there's a lot. You can see ISO 20022 talks about CBDCs, wholesale CBDCs. It talks about interoperability. One of the things that we've seen on a consistent basis, and we don't have to go through this whole thing because it's long. Victoria Cleland from the Bank of England essentially stating that distributed ledger technology isn't underpinning the building of the renewed real-time gross settlement system, but interoperability certainly plays a role, and they're going to be able to integrate with and interoperate with distributed ledgers. So really interesting, especially given some of the trials that we've known the Bank of England has accomplished over the past handful of years. Some of those being Ripple, some of those being with interledger protocol. And I'm sure there have been tons of other trials that we don't even know about, but it's kind of all what's coming. I mean, everything kind of operates and interoperates within each other. That's the whole goal of what these organizations are building out.
Yeah, and there's no point to use the distributed ledger with a centralized entity that's going to make a centralized system, right? There's no point to that. So as long as it's updated and digitized, kind of like what we saw at the clearinghouse, and it has that capability of interoperability, then we're all set. So this is the next slide. This is the ECB. It says a global coordinated efforts are needed to bring crypto assets into regulatory frameworks. It shows the executive board at Columbia.
Yeah, this was interesting down below, Darren, if you get to like thread 4 and 5, because you talk about the BlackRock, proof of concepts, testing out for potentially issuing CBDCs. And then you got the European Central Bank completely shifting the narrative again, saying, preparing for the issuance. They know that all of these central bank digital currencies are coming. The rhetoric isn't just we're going to build out proof of concepts. They are literally preparing for these initiatives to be issued. And you found section 4 within this extremely interesting as well, I think.
Yeah, so it says, but not swiftly enough. We need globally coordinated efforts to bring crypto assets into the regulatory framework and ensure that they follow the same standards as the rest of the financial system. And we've saw legislation recently from the ECB, or proposed legislation, that talked about KYCing every single crypto wallet. That's they're trying to move in and identify everybody in crypto, so then they can tax it and know their customer and be able to make sure that they know everything that's going on. But I mean, that already exists today, just with the on-chain analytics firm. There's CipherTrace, right? CipherTrace, if they know exactly what's going on in crypto. Now they're focused on billion-dollar crypto holders and a little bit in that area, but they can tell whose wallets whose and what they're doing with, and they're able to distinguish what is illicit use versus what's real use.
It'll be really interesting to see what happens when we do have kind of that regulatory clarity across the board as far as things like DeFi are concerned, because won't it be a little bit hypocritical if we see things like regulated DeFi? Like that's kind of, those two phrases don't necessarily go together, but we all know that regulations are coming. It'll be interesting to see what gets shaken out, what doesn't get shaken out, what's allowed, what's not allowed. Yeah, it'll be really, really interesting.
Well, I mean, for DeFi to be regulated, right, there just needs to be that identity component to it. Like you said, it kind of takes out like the first part of why people wanted DeFi, for the anonymous transactions and everything. But at the same time, I think it's a better method, just like if you think about liquidity pool tokens and how they operate versus order books, where you're trying to buy at a specific price and sell at a specific price. While liquidity pool token, I just hit swap and it swaps it. So I think there's a layer of efficiency with DeFi that is going to be accepted broadly, just because it's more efficient, and everything that we talked about earlier about GDP being boosted and everything. There's going to be use cases for that, especially like for retail, stock investors, stuff like that. Like there's no reason for somebody to put in, something in the order book when they can just swap.
Yep. This was interesting though. Ashish Burla a few days ago putting out some RippleNet statistics. And the growth on a quarterly basis is great. I mean, you can see from Q1 2021 to Q1 2022, ODL payment volumes, and it's just consistently, obviously moving up. Even I think if you look at Q4 2021 to Q1 of 2022, I mean, the growth is drastic. And it's nice to see, even given the lawsuit that Ripple was under, facing, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, we're seeing network growth, and that's really what I'm interested in, is network growth, more so than any of the narratives or rhetoric that we're being presented. So
yeah, and the liquidity is the important part, right? It's if the digital assets that are the most liquid, they're going to have the opportunities that other ones don't. So you could build a crypto that's costs nothing to send it. It's extremely fast and everything, but if nobody could sell it for anything else, then it's really not really worth that much. But if there's a network that has really liquid endpoints to it, that's going to be a network that's attractive if you want to build something on it. So
yep,
I think this is the same thing that we went over in PDF form.
Yeah, well, this is, I mean, more so just we talk a lot about dominoes in this space. I mean, I can even allude to kind of the metaverse fund that Goldman Sachs and DBS, and I think there was one of the Hedera governing board members, I don't know if it was Shinhan or one of them, but once you see one of these institutions announce something, you and I both know that, okay, well, there's going to be more things that are announced this week from other institutions, and it's kind of the same thing. We saw Fidelity announce, which is in the next slide, we saw Fidelity announce, what is a product that Fidelity announced in the next slide, Darren?
It's a Bitcoin.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, allowing Bitcoin and 401k retirement accounts essentially up to 20%. And then you see these large institutions, just announcing things, piggybacking on top of each other. So it is kind of that domino effect, and we're going to consistently see that across the board moving forward.
Now, do you think this is like a monopoly of institutions that all release the same news at once, or do you think it's like some regulator that just gave the green light and everyone runs after it at once?
I mean, you and I both know from looking at things like the IMF and Bank for International Settlements and the European Central Bank, it seems to me like there's a monopoly of news, where one organization, like sometimes even within those banking institutions, like it happens in the same day.
Yeah.
It's like European Central Bank will announce something, but then Bank for International Settlements will announce something different, but there's synergy, and it's like they're talking about the same thing across the board. So it might be a little bit of both, though. I mean, with something like this, I mean, regulatory green lights, et cetera, but it's interesting to see how these news announcements seemingly roll out at very similar times. So
Yeah. I think I agree with you. It's a little bit of both, So NEOM, which is formerly Instarem, seeks to expand the network to Europe. So NEOM, which is an ODL partner, talks about moving their service from the Philippines and Mexico corridor rather, and they're going to start moving to services in Australia, Singapore, and Malaysia. So that's pretty big news. The network's expanding, more corridors are getting regulatory clarity to actually use it, which we know Singapore is pretty forward leaning, as well as Australia seems to be mixed. Like, they are forward leaning, but at the same time, they push for pretty oppressive regulations for crypto. And
yeah, I think Australia is really interesting to me too. I mean, you see things like Hedera Hashgraph and that proof of concept they did with FPOS. FPOS is essentially the debit card system of Australia and New Zealand, and that proof of concept was obviously successful. I believe that FPOS now sits on the board of Hedera Hashgraph, and I've seen documents where there was all sorts of omitted things. So Australia is certainly building out. I mean, even look at ASX and the chess system and all these different aspects. I mean, they're certainly building out towards DLT and digital assets. So
yeah, and also we know that James Wallace from Ripple was talking about all the countries that have central bank digital currency products. He says we're working with a central bank on every continent except for Antarctica. So I'm really wondering if Australia is one of those continents that is using Ripple CBDC software, and everything that comes with that. So found that pretty interesting. The next.
Is NEOM and Instarem, I can't remember, is that ODL?
Yeah, it's Instarem, and then they rebranded it as NEOM, I think. And,
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, they are ODL. So that goes back to Ashish Birla's chart of showing ODL becoming more liquid and more available. So Pella Capital, which is like an institution, is accepting their fees to be paid in crypto right now. So I found that pretty funny. It's their digital wealth management tools for real-time notifications, and they're just kind of stocks and different types of trading with institutions, and they're allowing payment in Bitcoin, Ethereum, USDT, and Litecoin.
We've seen, and we don't have this slide populated up, but even over the past week, we've seen lots of private banks starting to offer crypto, or at least the first two. LGT, which is a financial institution owned by the Princely House of Liechtenstein, working with Switzerland's Seba Bank to offer crypto to their clients. And there was another one a handful of days ago as well. Like I said, I mean, once you start seeing one announcement, expect to see more. So Comsbank was another one that was offering trading in crypto. Then like just Robinhood and some of these apps are moving more and more towards trading crypto. So it's kind of cool that you can pay for services with crypto. So this is on XRP. Yeah, I wanted to touch on this for a second, just because neither of us are affiliated with on XRP. But looking at kind of network growth and platforms, we know that XLS20 is coming out for NFTs within the XRPL, which is kind of that standard that everybody's been waiting for. And I'm just really interested to see what a platform like on XRP is potentially going to do from a marketplace standpoint. When you look at competitors out there, there's not going to be very many of them. I think there's XRPL coins or something is trying to do something similar. And then Sologenic, you could imagine, would be doing something similar, but look at the market cap of something like Sologenic at like 170, 180 million dollars. Not sure where it's at today, versus on XRP, that it has, around a $2 million market cap. Just really interesting to watch. So
what's on XRP doing exactly? Their interoperability for the XRP ledger, or the interoperability with NFTs? I didn't get a chance to really dig into it.
Well, I mean, they're doing right now that, they're operating as an exchange, but their marketplace, from my understanding, is going to allow for minting capabilities for projects within the XRPL, probably trading as far as secondary markets within NFT projects on the XRPL, et cetera, et cetera. And that marketplace, I would imagine, without knowing, is I'm sure built out for XLS20, even though we haven't even seen that release yet. So it will be interesting to see what competitors exist, and they're doing all sorts of other things as far as I think they've got almost like a podcast-esque portion, and news and education, but yeah, it's kind of running the gambit. Like I said, I've talked about this in videos before. Without stating financial advice, I'm extremely bullish on platforms on the XRPL that might be integrating some of these newer mechanisms that the XRPL kicks out as far as XLS20, and then you can move on from there. So
yeah, I'm excited for XLS20. I mint my cover art sometimes as an NFT and put it on Algorand, and I'd prefer to put it on the XRP ledger. So once that's easy to use, I'll migrate over.
And this is just kind of that price aggregator as far as a website's concerned. I don't think that it's weird. Sologenic isn't populating on this today, but I shared this website like a week ago. It just eludes me to believe that, there's a lot of different projects or platforms that are building out on the XRPL right now, that there's not a whole lot of, there's a huge disconnect, because if you look at the top couple, we got Corium, which is the Sologenic kind of layer one that they're going to be launching. Sologenic was at the top of this a couple of days ago. I think they might be having issues with pulling the price data in. But then really you get down below Casino Coin, and you're talking like most of these assets are only like $1-2 million market caps, sometimes even way lower than that. So be really interesting. It'll be really interesting to see what some of these projects can potentially do in the long term.
Yeah, and I'm impressed with just how Zum works and the DEXs work on the XRP ledger. There's a really fluid feel to it. I know with a lot of the other DEXs and stuff, I come across hiccups all the time, but most of the things that are built in the XRP ledger run pretty smoothly. I've never really had a problem, honestly. And so got a nice feel to it and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited about the XRPL 100% from an ecosystem standpoint. I'm very excited about Hedera as well. There's a lot of synergy as far as, you see these builders and you see devs really trying to do their best to innovate within these ecosystems right now. And you especially with something like Hedera, you've got kind of, I think they're at like 2.0 of their Ethereum virtual machine capabilities, et cetera, et cetera. And these networks are just going to grow, in my opinion, because they've got that. I believe the XRPL and Hedera, or HBAR of the ecosystem, they've got that enterprise grade utility, and there's going to be tools built out, and I think there's going to be a lot of competition when you're dealing with the Ethereum ecosystem versus Hedera, versus even look at Quant, because I know Quant's announced NFT standards, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to see a lot of innovation, and I think there's going to be a little bit of down the road, a leveling of the playing field as far as some of the network value is concerned. I think you're going to start taking a lot of market share away from proof of work based ecosystems.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, the bridges are going to be vital at that point. The more networks expand, the more interoperability is needed and everything. I was just using a Cosmos bridge the other day that worked pretty well. It didn't, but there is still high fees involved just from going from the Cosmos ecosystem back to Ethereum just to pay the gas to send it to my wallet. So it's like, you know, once all those become liquid and there's things to actually do on all these different enterprise chains, I think, you know, we're going to see an expansion of these networks and interoperability.
Yeah, even look at Polkadot was up like 12% or something like that yesterday because they announced a new bridging mechanism that essentially didn't have to deal in this relay chain that they've been using previously between parachains. I think really looking for bridges that are dealing in security, because that's one of the most risky portions of interoperability, is the security of these bridges, because they're easier to hack than the networks themselves. And if you start looking at bridges and bridge protocols and platforms that are doing things in a different or more secure way, there could be a lot of opportunity within some of those. I think it'll be interesting to see how all these things shake out, though. Certainly.
Yeah, it's like the F asset system. I wonder if that's going to work for bridges as well, to, you know, set up a bridge kind of in that same type of structure with the F assets. So that's a pretty decent for security standpoint and decentralization. So I wonder if the Flare team has any news coming up with a bridge. I'd be excited to hear about that.
Yeah, the announcement of Algorand's 7-figure grant to Flare, which is like a Supra grant, to be able to bridge Bitcoin into the Algorand ecosystem, I believe, or into Flare as well, is massive. I mean, you know, to put it in scope like these, that just alludes me to believe that, like, you know, you look at a network like Flare and you know, an ecosystem like Flare and Songbird, I would imagine that it probably gets tested on something like Songbird first, potentially. But that grant is not a grant to, I'm forgetting the word here, but to, you know, to just bypass and be like, oh, you know, it's just a grant. These ecosystems don't give out 7-figure grants. Even if, you know, the Ripple Creator Fund and Hedera, I'm assuming that you could do the math. So there was like 30 projects on the XRPL that got a grant that was like 3 or 4 million split between all of them. That's the type of money you're dealing with from the Creator Fund aspects. And it's a lot of money for a startup to get, you know, 30, 40, 50,000 bucks. But when you're dealing in a 7-figure grant, I mean, there's obviously something going on behind the scenes with a grant of that size being given to Flare. So really interesting.
It also tells you how much confidence that they have, right? Just that the Flare team is capable of actually, you know, I'm invested in Algorand. I really like their vision of scalability and decentralization, how they tackle those problems. And I think they do a good job tackling those problems. So it's a huge vote of confidence to see Algorand, you know, spend that much money to the Flare team to make that bridge happen. So hopefully they're able to, you know, make a bridge that's super secure and quick, right?
Yep, 100%, man. It'll be exciting to see. So well, I think this was a pretty successful podcast, getting back into it.
Yeah.
I think we need to be doing these on a weekly basis again. We'll have to nail down a date that works for both of us and try to put it out maybe the beginning of the week for everybody again. But yeah, dude, it's been a pleasure as always, man. And thank you guys all for listening into this, whatever iteration. I think this is the 4th or the 5th one. But moving forward, we'll try to make these more consistent, maybe nail down a date that works for everybody and try to get these out to everybody. So
Yeah, we'll set it up so we can get one done a week. But thanks everyone for watching. Please like and subscribe. Thanks.